Welcome to Food, Environment and Health Channel. In the next few minutes, discover the unexpected connection between the modern diet and the sharp rise in cardiovascular diseases and other health issues in recent times. Dive deep into the dramatic shift in human nutrition over the last 50 to 70 years and learn why a time machine might just be the secret solution to shedding those extra pounds and reclaiming your health. From hunter-gatherers to fast food, the journey of our diet and the secret to reversing its ill effects. Science says that the human species adopted an upright posture about several million years ago and, after a long period of development and changes, only acquired most of the characteristics we know today around 500,000 years ago. If we believe in evolution, our distant ancestors were small creatures only about a meter tall, with long upper limbs for climbing trees. And it sounds nice when we say that ancient humans were hunters, although for much longer in their history they were merely scavengers, capable of feeding only on what was so small that it couldn't defend itself. The first weapons, stones, arrows, and spears, began to be used relatively late, and until then, humans were forced to subsist on plants, carrion, eggs, and small animals such as lizards, insects, and turtles. How significant a role grasshoppers, termites, butterflies, and other insects played in the diet of prehistoric humans is indicated by the fact that a special enzyme for digesting the carbohydrates found in insects is produced in the human intestines. Then began the brain expansion. Since the onset of hunting wild animals around 2 million years ago, the human brain has gained mass, a phenomenon explained in several ways. On one hand, there was an increased intake of energy and nutrients because the flesh of wild animals was included in the diet, and on the other hand, hunting probably required the development of certain skills. Thirdly, gathering and digesting plant food took longer, which limited communication and social contacts. Finally, as the intake of plant food decreased, human intestines became smaller because plant food requires a longer digestive tract than meat. After the shortening of the intestines, the body saved energy and directed it towards brain development. Hunter-gatherers lived in small groups and frequently changed their place of residence because this was the most efficient strategy for survival in the harsh conditions of an inhospitable environment. The thermal processing of meat, which probably started quite accidentally around 1.5 million years ago, did not become widespread until 400,000 years ago because people took a long time to learn to control fire. Since cooked food is much more digestible and provides more energy, the brain expansion at the expense of reduced intestines became even more intense. And then, after several million years, a great change occurred. One could say, for the worse. Significant changes in lifestyle and diet began 10,000 years ago with agriculture and animal husbandry. Thanks to a more secure source of food, the farmers' women could have a child every 2.5 years, while women in hunter-gatherer societies gave birth every 3.5 years, so the number of farmers and herdsmen quickly increased. A diet based on cereals, milk, and dairy products helped the development of civilizations, but also paved the way for numerous diseases. But before I continue, let me just note that cereals were also used in prehistory. They just looked more like wild plants, were not cultivated intentionally, and their grains were much smaller. So, the first civilization, dense settlements, infectious diseases, monotonous diets, lack of sanitation made people shorter than in prehistoric times. Due to processed cereals, teeth began to decay, and parasitic diseases became widespread due to the meat of domestic animals. Cereals, as foods rich in energy but not so much in vitamins, minerals, and proteins, were ideal food for the hungry and poor, as well as for conquering soldiers. Just imagine the Romans crossing the Alps to subjugate Germanic tribes. What could they carry? Certainly not raw plant food or meat, but only sacks of cereals and legumes. When we enter any store, it seems like the choice of groceries is huge. In fact, it doesn't matter what you buy, most of it comes down to processed cereals. Due to the long shelf life and relatively cheap production, cereals are still a convenient raw material in the food industry, so at least 50% of the energy the average inhabitant of the developed world takes in through wheat, corn, or rice-based products. Human history is full of long periods of famine, great physical efforts, and suffering. Namely, scarce nutrition influenced the formation of physiological characteristics over periods spanning several million years, in a process known as evolution. The human species developed in different circumstances from today. To survive in situations where food was not available, our body was formed to convert every excess calorie into fat reserves as efficiently as possible. For these reasons, today's people are genetic winners, i.e., descendants of those whose genetics were the most advanced in this sense, or in other words, descendants of those who were most susceptible to gaining weight. Evolution is happening now, but at a very slow pace, requiring centuries for the slightest changes. For example, people were mostly lactose intolerant until they began to domesticate animals and use their milk. Today, lactose intolerance is most common among those peoples who have used milk less for centuries, such as the Chinese, Pima Indians, and the Bantu tribe from West Africa. Unlike the carnivores in Siberia, members of the Hadza tribe, who have mainly survived on starchy foods for centuries, have more enzymes for digesting starch in their mouths, so their saliva completely breaks down starch before it reaches the stomach. But the human organism has until recently not encountered an abundance of food often enough to have developed a mechanism to combat excess fat deposits. The period of the last 50 to 70 years, during which people's nutrition has completely changed, is completely insignificant for the unfolding of evolutionary processes and the adaptation of the organism to the new way of eating. Besides the fact that today we concentrate sugars, fats, oils, and salt from nature and add them to food, there are several other significant changes in the diet that cause every second inhabitant of the modern world to die from heart and vascular diseases. For example, the intake of plant fibers is insufficient because there is less fresh fruit and vegetables. Today we use food prepared in fryers that contains harmful substances, created by alternating heating and cooling of the oil. In the end, the meat of domestic livestock has more fat and less protein and iron than the meat of wild animals. Diabetes among the members of the Maya tribe was not recorded until they switched to a Western diet. Siberian nomads who mainly ate meat and fish had incomparably fewer heart and vascular diseases until they started living in cities after the dissolution of the USSR. Now they are mostly obese and have hypertension. To better understand how briefly we have been using cereals, we can imagine that the human species was created in one day. Besides the fact that today we concentrate sugars, fats, oils, and salt from nature and add them to food, there are several other significant changes in the diet that cause every second inhabitant of the modern world to die from heart and vascular diseases. For example, the intake of plant fibers is insufficient because there is less fresh fruit and vegetables. Thank you for your attention. If you liked this video, please like and share this clip and consider subscribing to the channel to receive notifications about new videos on similar topics.